doesn't hear me, you can come to the front. I don't ask questions or volunteers or anything. So, well, the first challenge you guys have is to understand what I say. So if you're not understanding something, instead of having a poker face, just let me know, and I will try to slow down because I start very slow, but I get very excited. Okay, so this is just the first 2 minutes. Okay, but anyway, so. Andres asked me if I had some PowerPoint, and Ernest was in my last PowerPoint 3 hours, 150 slides presentation, but I thought it might be a bit boring for you, and it might be challenging for 20 minutes. So I decided to just basically talk. I talked to Maris a little bit the other day about what he thought could be interesting for you. So I'm going to probably use 10 minutes, and then up to you to ask me questions, or do the classic Baltics to be quiet, don't ask anything and learn shit. So it will be up to you to take either road, because this time is for you, not for me. I don't need to be here. I think it's important for you to get something out of listening to people. So just to give you a short bio apart from Vite, for those who don't know, I'm Spanish. I'm actually born in Madrid a long time ago, too long ago. I haven't been working in Spain almost any time of my life. I worked for Accenture for 3 years. I was a programmer. I was programming COBOL and C++ a long time ago. I don't remember that. I don't want to remember that. But I did it, so yeah, I feel proud about it. I work in Turkey, in the UK, where I was in Accenture. Did my MBA in France and Singapore. I spent 4 years at Diamond Cluster, which is a consulting firm mostly in telecommunications, in cellular. So I spent time in India, Brazil, 13 countries in Europe, South Africa, and somewhere else. Then I did my first startup, created a management consulting firm in London, Greenwich Consulting, which actually has been quite successful, but after 6 months, my wife told me this is the same shit that before, so I'm working for me. So basically I decided to join my first mobile operator. I worked in the Czech Republic for 2 years. We sold the company to Vodafone, and then basically I started my first 2 real startups. So did a management consulting firm for 3 years, and I did also at the same time I was the chief commercial officer and then the CEO for MN Channel, Multimedia Mobile Channel, which we used to do white label portals for mobile operators. What that really means is when you enter the Vodafone Live or these type of portals, and you want to sell music or games, etc., we were the platform behind it. So we managed to be present in 7 years, in 7 countries. We bankrupted the company, but I will get into that one. And then obviously after I bankrupted my company and I bankrupted my bank account, I needed to keep basically feeding my wife and me, so I decided, okay, what do I do? So I called up a couple of former CEOs I used to work for, and I got offered to work in Qatar, in Turkey, or here. And this was clearly the sunniest place I could go compared with Qatar and Turkey. So I decided to come to Latvia and Lithuania. And I signed it for 18 months and I've been here 3 years. So I guess I like it. So for us, Andres said, I have a startup skin under me. I think it's actually not under but above. And I actually spend a lot of time here with Maris and with Kristaps in Get Gamers and with some other companies. I also help 2 companies in Lithuania, and I help 3 companies in Spain, and I'm mentoring Sauna, in Startup Bootcamp, in a couple of countries. So that's what I really like. That's what I really, and I will do that after Vite, whenever that is, which will be in the coming 1 or 2 years, most likely. So let me tell you a little bit about what I did in Channel, and because I think it will explain a little bit what I know about the startups. There is actually one interesting question that I always ask myself, which is why did I join my first startup? Because I knew it was going to fail. My wife told me, you and that guy won't get along. You guys will have a fight within 12 to 18 months. It's just a question of time. And then you two will fight each other and will actually bankrupt the company. So that was the prediction. Was mostly right, in fact. And I could see it, but I still did it. 3 years later when I left, 3.5 years later when I left, and the company basically bankrupted 6 months later, I wonder, was I right doing it or not? Was it worth it? I lost a lot of money, both my personal money, the salaries, a lot of sleep, and a lot of many other things, a couple of friends. But I still actually, most of what I know today that I like to do is because I spent those 3.5 years. Secondly, we created 20 jobs for 3.5 years. They got destroyed afterwards, but to me, that's what all startups is all about. It's about creation, innovation, and destruction. And the cycle starts again. So, 20 jobs for 3 years, it means that we have 20 people ready to join another company, which they maybe didn't before. So that to me was basically worth it to do it. And that's why I still will do it again. But it is actually a very interesting psychological analysis. So a couple of things we did at Channel well is we actually got a $3 million seed round, seed and Series A round, and about €500,000 afterwards also from public money, and a valuation of about $12 million, okay? Which is not bad for a B2B company, in my opinion. We actually, now that I know, I still think, how the fuck we did it? How do we raise $3 million of a 12 million valuation? I don't know, obviously the VC wasn't the smartest guys in the world, because you could see the trouble. But anyway, we convinced them, so I guess we were very good at selling, which I think we were actually quite good at selling. So that taught me a lot about funding, okay, and about why you need the money, what you use the money for. Secondly, I learned a lot. Well, as I told you, it was clear I was going to get a fight with one of the other founders. And that taught me a lot about what you need to do when you're in the beginning of the company. So about shareholders agreements, about the discussions you need to have to people. So one of the things that I coach everybody, I cannot do that. One of the things that I coach everybody, and I ask Marius and I ask Christoph and everybody who I coach, is have you sit down to discuss with your other founders what are your intentions, what is going to happen when one of you guys get pissed off with each other, what is going to happen when the wife of you actually tells you that's it, what is going to happen if one of your kids gets sick and you need to move to another country. Because this is like when you're getting married, nobody wants to talk about what happens if you get divorced. But I can tell you that if you don't do it now and you do it actually when you're going to get divorced, I'm going to be that much fun. Okay, so you need to make sure that there is certain level of things that you clarify and you put on writing. You don't need to get a fancy lawyer agreement yet, that you will need in the future if you get a funding round, etc. But make sure that you write down a number of things. So first one is, what happens with the shares if you leave the company, and when you leave the company. So classic is, if you leave the company the first year, shares go back to the company, that's it. Thank you for working here, it is what it is. If you spend 2 years, okay, you sweat the shirt a little bit, so you deserve maybe to keep some of your shares. So maybe you keep 1/3, half of it, that's up to you. And if you probably stay 3 years or more, I think you added enough value so you keep your shares, regardless if you stay in the company or not. The timing and the amounts is up to you, but that's something that you need to do, because some of the founders should leave within the first 3 years. If not, probably the company has a problem, because I don't believe that all the founders will be qualified to run this company 3 years later, to start with. Because some people is very good at the beginning, some people is not that good afterwards. And if you have a team of 3 or 4 people, I don't believe they're going to be good enough. And there's nothing wrong about it. It's people who is great at creating companies, but really, really not good at growing the companies, which is the second discussion you need to have, which is, what can the team do? What is the CEO power? Because one of the most difficult things you have to do is tell a founder, you're not good anymore. Thank you for being part of the team, you need to leave. And if you're not ready to do that, you shouldn't be the CEO. And that's the easy one, because then you're kicking somebody who has shares. Imagine when you need to fire somebody who doesn't have shares, left his job, came to work for you, worked for half of the money, has a family, and you need to fire that person because he is not good. And if you don't do it, he's going to ruin your company. So as a CEO, you need to be ready for this. But you need to have this discussion. So in which terms you can actually decide that somebody is not working for the company. I mean, yeah. So that's the second discussion you need to have, and I think it's actually very important. The third one is usually about salary, right? Because you think at the beginning, oh, we'll work for free. No. We really love this company. We want to make it successful. Good. Yeah. 6 months later, one of your girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands starts saying, again, wait, we're not paying the mortgage. Why don't you have to start making money? Or the other founder doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't have a boyfriend, doesn't care about the salary. He's happy with the equity. He can probably stay maybe 18 months with equity, no salary. So how do you deal with that? You want to deal with that when you have pressure at home, or you want to deal with that in advance? You have a discussion, you know what, I can really live without salary for 12 months. That's my commitment. After that, I need this amount of money. And if I don't get this amount of money, because we don't have funding, because we don't make money, probably I need to leave. That's what I want you guys to do with each other. Look at the eyes and don't bullshit. There is nothing wrong to wanting to make a salary. In fact, there is a lot of things good about wanting to make a salary. There is no people who should be working for no salary for more than a year. That actually, in fact, to me, that's a principle. And these bullshit Excels in which you actually make $500 for 2 years, if any funding, any VC buys that, you shouldn't be working with them. Because you don't live with $500 a year for 2 years. And if that's the success of the company, I think you should be creating another company. Okay? So, but these discussions, you need to have them. Okay? And once you have them, write it down. Because we did have a lot of them. We didn't write shit. And 2 years later, 3 years later, no, I didn't really say that. What I really mean it was this, Okay? And when you have 2 people, maybe you even manage. When you have 4 people, as we had, that was trouble. That was really trouble. First thing that we fail, actually I want to tell you why we fail. First one is actually we make a strategy mistake. And that can happen to everybody. Okay? In our case, we didn't see the mobile applications coming. Okay? In fact, in 2007, I was in Brazil with my CTO, and one of the clients says, why don't you guys make a client? Whether instead of doing a web-based, or in this case, web-based portal, why don't you actually make a client out of it? I said, that's not going to work. Which was probably right in 2007, or even 2008, but the moment the iPhone came out and Android came out afterwards, the world changed it, right? So if we would have actually done the client, probably the client would have been a piece of shit, but we would have enough knowledge to move very quickly afterwards and maybe survive. But we didn't see it, but that happens. Sometimes you need to make decisions, and you make the wrong decision. Second one is actually, we had a terrible CTO, which happened to be one of the founders and happened to have 27% of the company. Okay? I didn't know at the beginning, because I look at the platform, looks like it works, This guy looks like he knows his shit, nice guy, etc. By the time I knew, I spent 2 years trying to fire the guy, and I didn't find a way to do it, which was actually one of the reasons why we failed. Because our platform was not scalable. Our platform was fantastic for one client, but every time we have a new client, it basically needs about 4 months and 6 programmers to adapt it to the next customer. Which if you live in Madrid and you're paying 35,000 euros a year per programmer, basically it's about 40,000 per customer just to do the customization. So just imagine for which price you need to sell it on a 2-year contract. That's not including the maintenance, people doing maintenance, loading content, etc., right? So it was dumb actually in that sense, but I didn't have any way to fire the CTO because he and the other founder have 51% of the company. So there was no way on the shareholders agreement that we could actually kick him out. You could ask him to do it, which is what I did at the end. He said no, then I left myself. But that was a problem. And the scale issue is actually something that you guys should be thinking, because I think we have a tendency in the Baltics to not think big. I'm sorry to say, you're creating a company to be small, you shouldn't be creating a company. I don't believe in small companies. Small companies don't work. If you don't scale a technology company, you're dead. It's just a matter of time. Somebody will copy you, somebody will be faster than you, some client will ask you actually to reduce the price if you have a B2B, etc. So you need to think big. Your obligation as a CEO is to think about how we make this big. And I have huge discussions with Mr. Morse and about this one. Yeah, we're making money. I said, how do you make this big? How do you grow 20x, 30x, 40x constantly? If you're in the tech space and you don't grow, you're dead. Maris and I, working on this one, we're very happy to grow 50% every month. And it's fuck, that's what the Excel says. So that's the minimum we need to grow every month is 50% over the previous month. Because if not, you are nobody. You need to scale all the time. So you need to be thinking about how to be big. You need to how to scale the business. Most of you guys want funding, which is fine. But the funding question is, what do you need money for? And there's only one answer, to grow faster than without money. Any other answer is wrong. You don't get money to grow. You get money to grow faster than without money. If you cannot grow without money alone, forget it. Game is over. But when you get the money, then you can go faster. So you can invest on people, etc. And this goes to what I have seen in a lot of you and other entrepreneurs, which is they manage to get the money, which is then difficult, and I will tell you a little bit about the process of getting money. Okay? And then they keep the money in the bank. Great! That's fantastic, guys. Well done. I don't know if you have, there is this parable in the Bible, right? That God gives the guy 1, 3, and 5 coins, right? And one comes, and so God, after 1 year, I gave you 10. Oh, thank you. You multiply by 2, right? The other guy comes and says, I gave you 3, I gave you 4. I tried to multiply it, but could. Okay. And one I said, well, God, you gave me 1, I give you 1 whack. I just put it under the land, it's back. So I didn't give you the money to keep it. I gave you the money to grow it. I didn't give you talent to give me the same shit back. So if I give you money, it's because I want you to grow faster. Get people, get a process, spend on marketing, whatever you want to do, but do it fast. And if it doesn't work, company's bankrupt, fantastic, next one. You are not in the business of waiting all your life to see if you, do something well, do your best, try everything possible. If it works, get more money and keep going. And if done, close it and move on. You will know when the company is not going to succeed. Nobody else, not the VC, not your friends. You know perfectly when the company is dumb. And you know which day is that one? The day you don't want to come back to work again. And you think it's not possible? I can tell you it is very possible. I have a company in the US that left the company with 50,000 euros on the bank from funding. Because the CEO said, doesn't work. He did the wrong thing, which is leaving with money in the bank, because you have an obligation with shareholders. Okay? But I can tell you, there is a moment, if it's not working and you have tried everything possible, in which I cannot do it. And then the only question is just you, who is not good enough, but somebody else could run the company for you? That hopefully will be the answer, because that means there is a future. As a shareholder, you keep value, or is that, no, it's just that the company, the technology just doesn't work. Okay? But you know that, nobody else. Again, this is the third time I'm telling you something about look at people in the eyes and be true to yourself. If you cannot do that one, go for LMT, to give you an example. Nothing against LMT. Okay? But really, entrepreneurship is about be true to yourself and your partners. And your partners includes your partners at work and your partners at home. Because they have trust you that you're going to do the best you can, and they're probably sacrificing something for you. So you at least need to work with them. Funding. Let me talk about funding a little bit. So how long do you think it takes to get money? And money is when you have the money in the bank. Everything else is not money. It's promises. So since the day you start talking about somebody, you have clients, technology, prototype, demo, something, okay? And you really have a beautiful story. So how long do you think it takes to get money in the bank from that point? Any guess? Okay? That's not a bad guess. So that's what it will take you more or less. That's if you're lucky. That's the good scenario, okay? The bad scenarios will take you 12 months. Okay? Even worse, people think that when they get a letter, these days usually an email, from the VC or the angel investor, I'm really interested in investing on you. and they send you the term sheet, which says, we value your company at $3 million, we're going to give you 100,000 euros, these are the 3 or 4 points, our lawyers will be sending you the agreement, they get the champagne out. Poor guys. Okay, because that's the beginning of the nightmare. Okay, this is welcome to the worst 3 months of your life. I can guarantee you that these are going to be the worst 3 months of your life. So don't get the champagne, please. Put it on the fridge and wait, because it's going to take you at least 3 months to get to a 45 pages agreement read by 2 lawyers in each of the sides, all your founders and the whole VC and angel investor. And by the way, when you ended up signing it, you still don't like it, but you're just running out of time. Okay, when we signed our agreement, we signed the agreement we got the term sheet on the 29th of September, and we got the money in the bank on the 31st of January. It took 4 months to sign something. Yeah, we have an agreement of valuation, term sheet, main clauses, 4 months. We were 1 day to close the company. 1 day to close the company. We didn't have money to pay salaries on the 1st of February. Okay, so you were coming to work 5th of January after Christmas. You're coming to work, hey, hi, good morning, how was Christmas? Yeah. You close the door and you're like, holy shit, 25 days. Okay, and then the next thing is you pick up the phone. Oh, I really don't like this clause, guys. I'm never going to sign this clause. Never going to sign this clause. And I really never going to sign it, right? You have 25 days to sign it. Because they know you're dead. They don't know that. But so this game you have to play continuously. So the negotiation is really tough. Which brings me to the next learning. Never have the CEO doing the negotiation of the deal. You know why? Any guess?
Too emotionally involved?
Not bad, not bad. If you're not salesman, you should never be the CEO. So no, that's not that. That's not a bad one. If you're lucky, you're going to sign an agreement, right? At the end of this period, with this VC. So you don't want to spend 4 months telling that guy he's a motherfucker and I'm never going to sign this, or you're dead, buddy, right? And 4 months later, you're drinking champagne and you sit together on the board of directors and you have to work together for the next 5 years, right? As I said, it could get a bit emotional, okay? So that's why I never want the CEO to lead this negotiation. So you have 2 options. You have somebody strong enough in your team, CFO, COO, depending, I don't know, depending on your structure, or get somebody from that side to help you. Get an advisor that you trust that can do most of the talk and most of the discussions. The CEO is to sell the company. Once he has sold the company, once the guy loves him, once they say, I really want to invest in you, get away. What is the second reason? The next 4 months, I need the CEO to be working, not fucking reading lawyers' agreements. And on conference calls every single day for 2 hours, back and forth with the VC, with the lawyers, and worrying at night about it, and thinking just about this. Because I don't want to lose 4 months of my company, because by the time probably get money, there is no company. So that's the second reason. The CEO should be running the company, not running the funding. Okay? So he's key on talking to people, getting attention, and getting them to sign a term sheet. Then get away, get somebody else to help you. No. Which is one of the things I do the most with the guys. And in fact, they shouldn't even running most of the show, because the CEO should not be doing what he likes to do. And we thought, well, to our friends, today I met Axel Partners. Oh, tomorrow I'm meeting Balderton Capital. Oh, tomorrow I'm meeting eVentures. So, you're running the business, not meeting people. So, let somebody else organize you every single meeting. Send information. Do the follow-ups. The only thing I want the CEO is to go to every single meeting because he's selling the company. He's the salesman. Everything else, get somebody else to help you. Oh, I don't have people, it costs money, blah, 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 blah. Excuses. He's writing an excuse because he likes to be doing the funding, because he likes to ego to get bigger and bigger about how important and how nice his company is. He's not thinking about the good of the company. And even if it's your own company, you have employees, You have people who trust you. So you're not there to do what you like. You're there to do what the company needs. And you need to be thinking about that every single week. Because the third thing that I want to talk about is called control freaks, which is what most of the CEOs of small companies are. Okay, because it's their own company, and they created themselves with their own fingers. It's like having a baby, right? I don't want anybody to touch my baby for the next 9 months. Well, you might be the CEO, you might own 100% of the company, hopefully not. Hopefully some of the people who work with you, and I will touch about that, do. But you are not good at everything. In fact, probably you're not very good at many things. Okay? You're good about 2 or 3 things. Hopefully product, selling, and people management. Everything else, there should be somebody else doing it for you. It costs money. That's why you're a salesman. Convince them to do it for equity, for the love of life, because they trust you, because then you will actually give them something back at some point in life. That's what your charm, that's what you have to be selling them. If you're really good and you have a really good vision, people will follow you. This is like the flautist of Hamelin, you know, you have the rats behind you. So this is the same thing. If you sing a good song, people will follow you. You need to sell something, that's what I mean, you need to sell big, you know. Doesn't matter what you are today, you're selling what you're going to be. And then in sauna, they said, from today on, you're the market leader about something. It's just up to you to decide what is the market leader, right? So define a quadrant on a category that nobody has heard ever of, okay? Change the axis, you know, and you are the market leader. You might be the only player, but you're the market leader. Okay, so start being the market leader about something. And if you believe in yourself, people will believe you. People doesn't do due diligence of these things. Okay? And the last thing I want to say, actually, we had a conversation yesterday. And I see the wise guys here, so it's interesting. You know why and I have to write a blog post about this a long time ago, but I haven't done it yet. Do you know why the Estonians do much better than the Latvians and the Lithuanians in the internet world? Yeah, they do. Much better, so far. So far. Okay. Because they have Skype. But this is not because they all use Skype more than you, okay? Skype did something very interesting, 2 things very important for them. One is if people knows what Estonia is. Okay, you know, to New York, to any tech, say, oh, I'm from Estonia. Wow, you're from Estonia, woo! They had no idea what Estonia was. They didn't even know Estonia existed as a country. But because Skype is Estonian now, everyone in New York knows where Estonia is at, right? So it gave you basically a brand recognition. You say from Estonia, people listen to you. It gives you the 15 seconds of attention that you need to sell something. The second thing that it did, and I hope a lot of you are going to do at some point, is it created rich people. But it created a very special kind of rich people. People who wanted to invest back on other people. It created angel investors. It gave it, imagine that if 20 people got €1 million, I'll tell you they got much more than that, but 20 million got €1 million each, 20 million. And half of that they invested back into startups. That gives you 10 million. If you invest 100,000, you have 100 startups being funded. If 10% of that becomes successful, average, regular, that means you have 10 companies successful. Each one of them get $1 million. And then you have another 10 million multiplied by 10 million by 10 million. And suddenly you have funding. Okay. So what I want is that whoever is going to be here rich at some point, okay, I know one bald guy there who will, at least, I will make them sure it happens, is invest back in the community. And secondly, it's not about you being rich. It's about you and everybody in your company to be rich. Because I don't want people to think this is that old Russian way of the oligarch who was smart enough to keep all the company for him, screw everybody else, and keep all the money for him. You need everybody in your company to become successful. Maybe you get more because you put more risk at it. But I want everybody, your employees, especially the guys who started with you, to be generous. You have nothing at the beginning, just your equity. Be generous about it. Make sure that when you sell the company, they have the money to invest in other people. They become role models. We need role models in Latvia and in Lithuania that people wants to be like them. There is nothing more powerful in a school than role models. Everybody wants to be an ice hockey player, you know, or not everybody wants to be a beach volley player, you know, because they got a medal. Woo! No, they became a role model. Nobody knows if they're pretty, what they study, if they really like it, if they're happy. They just know they got an Olympic medal. They're a role model. Now everybody wants to be a beach volley player. So I want everybody to be an entrepreneur in technology, because that's the guy who really gets rich and invests in the community, and everybody wants to talk at chats, and when they go for dinner, everybody says hello, and they actually smile a lot. They are bold, because they got bold after 5 years of startups, but they keep smiling. Yeah? That's the difference between you get bored and don't smile, or you smile afterwards. I kept some of the hair, but it will go away in my next startup, I'm sure about it. Okay, that's how it goes. And by the way, just one last thing. Well, we're about to run out of the money in that beautiful month of January 2009, okay? None of us could sleep, okay? Because you go to sleep and your brain is working. It's fuck 23 days, 22 days. What the hell are we going to do after this, right? One of my partners has never go back to sleep. He has insomnia for life. I managed to go back to sleep. I still sleep well. So I in a nice, pretty story sometimes. Okay? You will suffer. If you want to be successful, you need to suffer. If you suffer, you might become successful. But I can guarantee you, if you don't suffer, you won't be. But it's not guaranteed, but this is about sweating. And people who work harder than the rest usually has a better chance. Sometimes they get unlucky. Pick the wrong product, the wrong developer, the wrong marketing strategy. Well, start again. Pick up some money, pay your mortgage a little bit more, go back and do it again. Because once you do it once, if you're too entrepreneur, you can stop doing it. Everything else becomes way too boring. It looks fancy and nice for 2 years, and then you just want to do something else again. Okay, I can guarantee you that. If you're not an entrepreneur and there is nothing wrong about it, then you will be happy working at Bitel, MT, you know, Maxima, Remy, whatever. There's nice jobs at Maxima, Remy. It's just different jobs, different like stamina, different rhythm in life. It's people who don't want to live 30 days for bankruptcy the rest of your life, you know? And that's fine. It's people who get excited about it, and that's fantastic. Okay, that was 17 minutes instead of 10 minutes. So, okay, so your turn, guys. Questions?
What's your next startup?
That's interesting. I'm not very good at starting companies. I'm very good about joining companies that have been started. Actually starting right now 2 companies in Spain, but with 3 or 4 more people in the fashion side. So, but I think I'm good at growing the companies and not at starting them. And I'm way too expensive also, even if I cut my salary by 3 times or 5 times for the initial stage, because I'm not good at programming. I'm not good at the AdWords or Google Words, you know. So I'm good when the company gets probably the run and they need to manage 10 people. That's what I'm good at it. So maybe one of these guys will need me at some point, or if not, it will be something else. But the second one is to keep running into 3, 4, 5 different companies, which I also think actually is useful. But at some point, I think I want to have all the skin of the game in one place, just for the fun of it. So that is at least 1 year away, I think, at least.
Any other questions? Who else wants to ask?
How much of the percent of startup, of good startup is, how much is money and how much is idea?
Idea 0.
Percentage.
Idea is 0. 0.1. Team 30%, execution 30%, money 40%. 39.9 in this case. If you have the first 2, if you can execute and you have a good team, you can make any idea fly and get some initial money. Then we'll see if you can go any further. But don't worry about the idea. People here is always worried about, oh, they're going to copy my idea. Oh my God, to copy my idea. I don't want to talk to anybody about it. You're fucking damn stupid. Because if they can't copy it that fast, you should be doing the company to start with. So please copy me fast enough so I realize that I'm actually not doing the right thing. And if they cannot copy you that fast, it's because you have something good. and you're executing faster than them, and you have to be ahead of the time. But challenge, talk to people, get advice, etc., etc. Oh, I have seen 9 companies like you. Oh, because usually we think we have no competitors. And the brightest guys in the world, nobody has this idea. The moment you start scratching the surface, there is 20 companies like that in the world already doing that. So it's about speed and execution.
What is the role of the board in the early stage of startup, and who should present there?
That's a great question. It was actually on about the board of advisors. Well, there is 2 things, the board of advisors and the board of directors, right? Which could be different roles. Initially, it could be the same. The role of the board of advisors initially is to cover everything the CEO cannot do. Okay? That might be helping him on funding, introducing him to people internationally. Might be, if you actually working on B2B, you are going to meet people that is 50, 55, and maybe they think that kid or 22 is not a good guy to talk to him, right? So maybe sometimes they go to a meeting, wearing a tie and a smile, have a little white hair, and kind of get some respect ahead of the meeting, right? So, but probably will be funding, customer, or an area in which you don't have any idea, and if you need a PR specialist, if you need a marketing specialist, if you need a customer acquisition specialist. So that's why we say the board of advisors should be. The board of directors, I think there should be obviously somebody from the company, ideally no more than 2. Sometimes only 1 person. I don't want to have the entire fucking company in the board of directors. A lot of people being the whole team. I want 1 person. That person should have the vote of everybody else, but it's 1 person. CEO could be CFO. I guess sometimes you don't want the CEO to be there. Usually it will be the CEO, but you don't need to. Shareholder, anybody having more than 10%, in my opinion, should be represented at least at the beginning in the board of directors. And at least ideally 1 independent guy that the company trusts.
Kind of mentor.
Somebody who you trust, because at some point they will be voting, and they might be voting to kick the CEO out, they might be voting for a strategic decision, they might be voting, and you want somebody, first independent, but secondly that you trust. And somebody might actually tell you, I'm going to vote against you, but you know that he's not doing it for the wrong reason. Because that's what I don't like also when the CEO is the chairman. Because then I don't need a fucking chairman. If I have the CEO, the chairman, the same thing, it's useless. I want the chairman to be able to overrule the CEO sometimes because he might be wrong. That's why you have a board of directors. They become the governors and the shareholders, and they have the right to think differently than you. Just make sure that you have control at the beginning, so you can do what you want to do as a company. But
If at the beginning CEO is also the shareholder,
yeah.
that is usual,
yeah.
then he cannot be fired because he should also be presented in the board of directors at the same time.
That's the problem. He cannot be fired. Maybe he needs to be fired at some point. Because maybe he's not good enough. And maybe he's too in love with his initial baby idea and we need somebody else. So make sure that, of course, you should always maintain your shareholding. That doesn't mean that you should maintain your executive position in the company. So make sure you are protected to never be stolen your shares because you owe them, because you have worked very hard. But make sure that at some point, if you're not the right CEO, you can be kicked out. Because a lot of people want to build enough protection so they can never be kicked out unless they decide to, and that is not good because other people has put their money. So they also have rights. So it's a fine balance between those 2. But initially, get surrounded by people who know more than you, have done things you haven't done, are unimportant in the industry that you need, or have access to funding or to people and respect that will help you basically grow the company. And you can ongoingly ask for questions and doing this, I have doubts, even personal questions. If you have that personally, you need to trust somebody. So it will be good that you can put somebody in that advisory that you consider a mentor, and you can, hey, I have doubts about this, I'm not feeling good about this part, It's good. We're humans. We're going to have times in which we're going to feel weak, or we need to, and being CEO is a very not lonely place. Because sometimes you cannot confide in anybody. You have to find one of the C-level guys. I'm not going to be telling the other guys around it. I'm the only one who may be thinking that it's not a good thing to have in your mind. You are going to be suffering about it for a number of days. So you want to talk to somebody who you can trust, who you can get some advice. Hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is the right thing, etc.
What do you think about focusing on one versus several startups. And at which moment it definitely should be one, and at which moment there could be several.
If you want my money, you work only in my startup. If you use your money, you make your own guesses. So that's the thing. I have seen here a lot of people who is just playing around a couple of startups. The moment you want money, and you're going to tell me, I want your money, but I'm not going to be 100% on your company, you have to be kidding me. Right? So I think that's the moment in which you decide. Second one, you cannot love two babies at the same time. Sometimes you have twins, but it's not usually the case, right? So at some point, in one of the two companies, at least you cannot be the CEO. That doesn't mean that you cannot be in the board or even the chairman, but in one of the two companies, you cannot keep running the same company. Or one of the two companies is going to be suffering in terms of performance. Because a good startup needs a 100% dedicated CEO. It might have everything else part-time, but at some point it needs a CEO dedicated. So it's good that both companies are starting, 3 companies starting, etc. But at some point in 6 months max, you need to decide which one you run and which one you let somebody else to run it. Again, you cannot be a control freak. I love to run both, but you can't, right? And if you need money, for sure, if they see you have any stake in any of the company, they're going to be challenging you big time. And you better have a credible story to tell them that from the next day, the thing you care is about the company they're going to put their money on. And this is a problem. I've seen people going with these stories. It is a problem. It's very difficult if they don't trust, the conversation won't continue. Everything is the best company in the world. So.
I've heard that at the initial stage, you should invest as little as possible and then break even as fast as possible. What is your opinion on that?
If you can break even, that's great. If you can break even as fast as possible, of course. However, this is why I said you need the money to grow faster, not to become profitable. You should have a way to become profitable on your own or with very little investment. However, at some point, people think that internet businesses, you can run them with 100,000 euros. Well, there is an issue where anything on the street needs to pay a lot of rent, right? When you're in a good street, you pay a lot of rent. So when you are in the internet, you need to pay a lot of rent, which is called traffic, okay? And if you don't have the money to bring the traffic one way or another, you're going to not sell. And that costs a lot of money. So if you get a lot of money, you can go much faster. So you should have a business that breaks even, but you need the money to grow. But touching on that point, it's funny, Ernest, this doesn't go against you. Never ask for $500,000 at the beginning, okay? Nobody will, if you have a demo or working better, and maybe, let's say, 10,000 users, okay? Worth 9 million euros, my ass, right? Nobody's going to believe you, right? So if you ask for $500,000, usually they're going to value at 1 million euros, and that's already a very good valuation at the beginning. So you already give away 50% of your company. Oh, I have $500,000, I'm super cool. Yeah, but you only have half of your company. So one more percentage and you don't even run your own company anymore. So try to get at the beginning some money that allows you to kind of grow fast and to prove your hypothesis. 50,000, 100,000, you don't need more than that. Because also you don't know how to manage more than that. You have no idea how to manage €1 million and how stupid you become the moment you have a lot of money in the bank. And you think you're going to be hungry as hell. Bullshit. When you have $1 million in the bank, you relax. You know, now you get some salary, etc. So you need to feed yourself with hunger. I still need to make that point 6 months from now, in which I need to break even, or I need to have 1 million customers so I can get my next round of funding if you really need it. So go for small rounds at the beginning. Yeah, you know, it's impossible to have only life for 6 months. Every company has only life for 4 months. Even a consulting firm, we have cash flow for 4 months. If you don't make any more money the next day until 4 months from now, you're bankrupt. So every large company in the world, even the BTs, the LMTs have 4 months of life. Because they have more revenue. But if the next day they will run out of revenue, 0 revenue for 4 months, they will be dead. So it should be the same for you. What should be different for you? So have enough money to run for 6 months, maybe 9, so you can pivot a little bit if something is not working. And again, if it's going to take you 6 months to get more money, means that the moment you get the money, you need to start getting the next money. Okay, but do it while you're working, while you're growing, while you have a new case study, etc. And the money will come, among other things, because your investor needs you to get more money for him to make money. So the first interest in the world is about getting you more money. Because when you invest, the way to make money is two. Well, it's one, but one initially, which is higher valuation, more money in. Okay, so your shares are actually worth more money, and then selling the company. So don't worry, it's also, they're already on the game for you already. You're not alone anymore. One day they will like to say you want, and then you have a problem. One day your objectives will diverge. But at the beginning, you're both in the same boat. But never get too much money at the beginning. Don't. It's not good. By the way, it will take you the same amount of time. A good contract for 5 million will take you the same amount of time that a good contract for 50,000. That's the bad news. The good news is that you already done it once, so the next time you more or less know what the shit is going to be. And you kind of cut the corners and have already an agreement, and the lawyer's battle might be a bit different, right? But the amount of work is almost the same, because you have lawyers, you know. And as Andres knows, once you involve the lawyers, it is what it is, you know, what can you say?
In the very beginning, how do you, from your experience, how do you decide about the amount of equity you're giving to your employees?
Are they important? Can you live without them?
Because you were saying that it's very important to share and make no
Yeah.
So how do you decide how much you give away and how much you keep for yourself?
Well, first is you need to understand how much you need to control the company with your shareholders in the future, right? Through rounds. Secondly, never give equity for free. So how much would you like to be motivated to offer a company? 1% or 10%? 3% or 6%? Each person is different, right? But you need to give them something that is meaningful, that when it gets diluted, because it will get diluted, it's still meaningful, right? Because 3% will count 0.1 in the future when this company is worth a lot of money, right? So you need to give them enough space to grow. Secondly, it needs to be sweat equity, okay? So even if you give them 3%, they have to stay for 3 years to really own it at the end of the day, right? So this guy is going to give you a lot of sweat and a lot of value in your company. So your 51% is going to be much better if this guy owns his 3% because he will have done something, right? And secondly is distinguish between key hires and not key hires, okay? So if that guy is really fundamental for your company, make sure that he's then happy and he's then motivated to stay. And it goes into the conversation in the aisles. Do you value equity or salary? Some people say, I want equity. Some people say, I want salary. Some people say, I would like to have in the middle, right? You still should give them some equity, but make sure you're not giving equity to somebody who doesn't value equity. If all he wants is stability, salary, I need to pay for my mortgage, fine, maybe you pay him and you don't pay yourself. Very normal case. You're paying your employees, but you're not paying yourself. Then you deserve more equity than them, because you're taking more risk. But you need to basically go through this process of understanding what they value, how they value, and then sweat equity. Never give equity away for free. You give the equity if they stay afterwards X amount of time and they comply for these rules. Nobody gets equity for free unless they pay for it. And nobody's going to give you money for it at the beginning because you're employees, right? So, by the way, I bought my equity in my company. I pay a lot of money for the equity in the company. Instead of having sweat, I just pay for it. Then I lost it, tough luck. But also gives you a very good incentive when you have paid for it to value that equity. Much more than if you actually don't pay for it. So if somebody wants to pay for it, that's a very good signal. Sometimes you might want to sell your equity to some employees, to some of your other management team. You didn't give them enough, they really get interested. Say, guys, I sell you 2%. I give you a loan over time. So obviously they maybe don't give you enough money, but sometimes use the rounds. Say the company's worth it right now 1 million. You guys only have 10%, but I think you guys are very important. I can give you 5% of mine. I'll give you a loan over time, but you're going to be that one. And if one day we get sold, you have to give me the loan back. There's many ways to do it. So equity is not static. It's dynamic, and you can play it over time depending how people evolve. Okay, so you might misjudge sometimes, and then you want to really motivate a guy to stay, Maybe you need to play some ways to basically get in, but you need them on the equity game. That's, salary only will motivate you for a certain period of time, for sure.
You said you have two startups in Spain. How do you choose where to sell them? Do you will sell them in Spain, or you will choose some other countries?
You don't choose.
You don't choose?
Somebody wants and makes you an offer. You know, like, you don't get that luxury. So, but basically at the end of the day, there is two ways to sell the company, to a financial investor or a strategic investor. If it's a strategic investor, means either a provider of yours, a customer of yours, etc., you will know. No. By the way, I don't ever work in a company that is only based in one country. So I will never work in a Spanish company that only sells in Spain, because I'm not good for that. I don't live in Spain. I have no fucking idea what the Spanish people want. Right? So I'm good at companies that go international. That's my core. That's what I know. That's how I can play, etc. Right? So even if they're Spanish.
And which countries do you prefer?
For what?
I don't know.
To eat? To drink wine?
Commercials.
I know which countries I don't like. More than countries I like. I like countries in which I can have talent, that is motivated, that is not too expensive, and that they think big, and that the legal context is not too complicated. This is not a bad country for that, by the way. They were asking me. Spain is a terrible country for that, because talent is extremely expensive. Even if you now have 25 unemployment, you still need to pay programmers 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 euros a month. They still might leave once they become good, because there is another startup who has money who wants to pay them, and most of them don't value equity. So and then firing people is terrible. It's fucking a nightmare. Lawyers, cost, etc. So it's a terrible country. UK is a decent country, but it's very expensive. So UK is a good country to have the company, but have all the back end here, or Lithuania.
But you agree that you must be in that country where you want to sell this startup?
No.
No.
Why? If they're buying where you're from, you have a problem. They're buying your customers, they're buying your technology, they're buying your brand, they're buying your team. One of those four things, a combination of those. No. So if you're selling badly, because you need to sell, you need to escape, there's going to be probably somebody around you. But if you're selling properly because the company is going well, where you are doesn't make a big deal. They will take care of it. They will take care of where to put the company, etc. It's different with the funding partner. Sometimes with the VCs, you need to be where the VC is at. So sometimes it might force you to move your company to where they're from. By the way, that can only be a legal issue. You can still be here and be based headquartered in London. You might have to have one by there. You might have to go more there. You will spend more money in lawyers, of course, from that point on. But you still can actually have most of your commercial or development up here or in Lithuania, wherever you are. So location is not that important. The only thing that is important in location is that the taxes and legal labor, that's what is important. So you have a country that when you sell the company is going to charge you 49% of capital gains. You're fucked. So don't be at that country. So, you know, these countries who give you in capital gains better performance, or these countries that labor code you cannot get rid of anybody, those are the things that should matter for you as an entrepreneur. But not the seller. If your company is going well, don't worry, it will buy a seller on its own. And if not, and it's going well, you will make money out of dividends. Some companies don't need to be sold. They just need to be making money, and then when you get tired, you find a new CEO, he runs the company, you get the dividends, and you do your next startup, and you're happy. Because in Europe, most of the sales are actually not very profitable, because there is not such a liquid market. If you're in the US, you can make a lot of money. In Europe, very few startups through the sale make a lot of money. It's sometimes much better to keep running a profitable company. Just make money out of dividends, get somebody else to run it when you get bored, when you cannot add value. That's it, that's great. That's not a problem at all. You won't be in the press, but...
You know, if I'm running a startup here and selling in Singapore, for
Yeah.
instance,
Yeah, do you mean you have customers in Singapore
Yeah.
rather than selling the company?
yes, I'm selling products.
So?
Okay, that's a different question.
Yeah, but there's different when you're selling. If you're selling on the internet, okay, doesn't much matter. You just need to have somebody who understands that country very well. So likely you're going to have a guy from Singapore either based here or they are running the company from you, okay, the commercial side of it, but you don't need to be there. If you have a physical distribution business, okay, then and your customers in Singapore, then for sure a lot of your people is going to be in Singapore. It depends a lot if you have this purely online or you have an online with some kind of physical distribution. Or B2B, then you will have to have commercial people there. I run a company in Channel. We have customers in 9 countries. I was the only guy doing sales for a long time. Okay? And then once the customers became Vodafone Turkey, Vodacom in South Africa, big fucking telco companies, I will hire one young guy who speaks the language, who will work from his home, okay, and who go every day to smoke cigarettes and have coffee at the canteen of my customer, just in case they needed to have someone there. Because we need you to have local presence. Because, I need to have the servers here. Who the fuck cares where the servers are? They're servers. No, so sometimes we mirror a server. We put it on the fucking client premise, even if all the software was somebody else. But we really need the software to be here. Okay? Yeah, fine. Sometimes you have implications legally. If it's outside the EU, you cannot move the data. So sometimes you might have to work with, that's what I mean, the legal framework is very important. But really, get the customers. Once you get the customers, then you figure out where you have to be, where you need to be there, but get the customers. That's way more difficult. Okay, then you have to keep them, but first get them.
Maybe I can ask another one. It gets back to this question. Why in Asia? Asia has a lot of talent, and it's very fast moving. It's not that expensive.
Why not?
Yeah.
Do you speak the language?
Well, in Hong Kong, English.
Okay. Do you know how much it costs to live in Hong Kong? A little bit, right? Yeah, little bit. Okay. You maybe got the answer already. If you can go to Malaysia, okay, and if it's not a physical distribution, but you better know somebody in Malaysia who can help you. You can only go to places in which you're going to understand where you're living, and when you need a lawyer, when somebody copies you, when somebody screws you, when somebody hires you, etc., you know it, right? So Asia is a great market. Again, that's what you want to have. If all your customers need to be in Malaysia, then you need to move there. There is no questions asked about it. But most of Asia is way more expensive than here. Way more expensive. Yeah, it's not in Bali. Okay, Bali is very cheap. You can eat basic Thai food for the whole year at 2 lakhs a day. Okay, it's not bad. Okay, but then if you want to live in Bali, and how the hell you're going to be selling somewhere else? Secondly, it's a huge time difference. So if your market is there, that's great. But if not, it's damn fucking difficult to live with 12-hour difference. It's extremely difficult to work with San Francisco. You know, if you're going to open a company here and then you're going to Silicon Valley, it's going to be a nightmare because there is 11 hours difference. When you wake up, they go to sleep. When they go to sleep, you're waking up. The only time in the day that you could inside is fucking when you should be sleeping. Okay, so it is very difficult. So you really want to go to the US? Oh, so fancy Silicon Valley. Oh, New York is 7 hours away. It is fairly easy at 2 o'clock to talk to people who start in the morning. Okay? I know people who basically don't sleep, not because they can, but just because they have to manage at 24 hours. So I think also, you know, so develop your product here, and then if your customers are in Asia, great. Start putting some operations there, start spending some time there, etc. I know a couple of friends of mine who have a business in Portugal. They basically got a joint venture right now in Indonesia. So they got 50% of the business, but the guys is spending right now 2 to 3. He thought he was going to spend 1 week a month in Indonesia. I said, you have to be kidding me. He's spending 3 weeks a month there because he knows inside out Portugal. He can do the business. You know, he knows, he trusts the people. He doesn't know anybody in Indonesia at the beginning. You don't know the market. You don't know who is speaking. You don't run business by email. Okay, so you're going to spend a lot of time there. So Asia is great, and if you're working in mobile, some of the countries is fantastic. But if you don't speak the language to start with, you have a problem. So that limits you. Singapore, Hong Kong. Philippines also, yeah. But you might be lucky, yeah. See, Philippines is not a bad country. Cheap, English speaking, lots of programmers, huge penetration of mobile. Just people don't want to pay for it, so it cannot be your market. But it's not a bad country, actually, for development. You're just there to learn how to be sitting with your ass in front of a computer and start becoming productive, right? Your first 12 months are a waste of time for your employer. Okay, anyway, that's why the consulting firms hire these people, right? because they can't afford to have 100 young students being effective, because then in the second year they're going to make money out of them, right? So that's why initially the first year. So I did my MBA very early, too early. Okay, it's not normal to do an MBA top ranked in Europe or the US with 25 years old. Okay, I was actually the 5th youngest guy in the class. Okay, so probably didn't benefit enough from it. I value it a lot because INSEAD is extremely international, and I know a lot of people. Because of that, any country that I go, I just look online and I know somebody either directly or through some INSEAD friend, and I can ring anybody, right? So now we were looking for, Marius gave me an assignment to find people in the UK and Germany in the venture capital world, right? I have some connections, I know some people. But within one night, I fired 25 emails, never to the guy that I need to know, just to my INSEAD connection connected to that person. Okay, this week I have already 12 of those 25 connected with the Skype calls arranged, etc. So that's the value that it gave me. And also it told me that I was by far not the smartest kid on the block. There was a lot of more interesting and important people and intelligent people around me. So it gets you much humble. Because you think you're the fucking star, you go there, you see all these people who is way more interesting, has done many more interesting things in life, speaks 3 or 4 languages more than you, okay? And then you're like, oh, holy cow, okay, And the next year, because I did it in 2000, the next year, half of those guys get fired. Okay, because that was 2000, and basically 2 months before I graduated, Poo.com went down, and the whole internet bubble started disappearing. Okay, within 6 months of my class was basically fired. All the investment bankers, all the consultants, and most of those people were more experienced, more intelligent, speak more languages than you. And then you realize that you are lucky. Okay? And so when we started the MBA, I remember the guy who did the initial speech was the managing director of Morgan Stanley. And he told us, there's 300 people sitting there, right? Hold on, yeah, thinking about fucking shit. They said there could be another 300 seated in your places today, and they will be as good as you. Because there is another 300 good guys in Europe, for sure, if not 3,000, right? So you're lucky. So anytime you talk to anybody, respect them, be humble, and remember you're lucky. And smile about it. And thank somebody if you believe in God, if you believe in your parents, thank somebody for what you have. So I think it teaches you a lot of, you're very confident afterwards, very self-confident afterwards, but I think you also realize that, luck has a place in life and your education, etc. So don't be too full of yourself, because you will always find out somebody who is better than you. So it had an impact. I didn't learn much academically. I got to know a lot of people that are friends of mine. I met my wife there, and I also met a lot of people that I will carry for life, And one thing I was talking to Marius about it, I just read a book who's called Never Eat Lunch Alone. Okay, it's a book about networking. And I consider myself, if you check my LinkedIn, you saw I have about 2,000 people. I actually know the 2,000 people. Be generous about your contacts. Somebody asks you for a favor. Don't think what he can do for me before you do the favor. Do favors to people, introduce people, be kind to people, it will come back to you. Never try to make the connections when you're looking for a job. Do it 12 months before when you don't need a job. People that smells desperation. You don't meet people because I want something from you. You meet people because they're interesting, because you have something to offer for them. So think what you can do for them. Don't worry, it will come back to you. And if it doesn't come back to you, don't worry, they will pay for it. Because people will understand that those people are not good people. They're not generous, and at some point, they will be cut out of the society. So when you're doing networking at any level, be generous. Always give more than you want in exchange. It will come back to you. I can guarantee you that. And if you don't, you feel really good about yourself. So you still actually is good about it. So be generous when you're networking, and never look for a VC when you need the money. Look 12 months before. Start making the connections today for what you need. Don't wait to have a nice product. Just say, hey, I'm a guy who wants to create my company. I saw a couple of guys that are really good. And by the way, I play soccer, and your kid plays soccer, and I will be happy to take him to see the Liverpool game. Just whatever, make a connection to people. Make them like you. Send them a recipe. I saw you love chicken, I have this fantastic chicken recipe. The biggest small thing can help you make a connection, but the guy will remember you for it. This is the guy for the chicken recipe. I love that recipe, man. I have done it 20 times after that. You think it only happens in America? That's bullshit. It happens everywhere. People will remember you for that more than, I'm the guy who tries to sell you the demo of my fucking business. One of the 5,000 who tries to sell me a demo because he needs my money. There's a lot of people talking to those guys. So make yourself different and go in advance and be generous.
Great. Thanks very much. I think we're going to... So I think it's a testament to your ability to keep the crowd interested, going quite a lot longer than you committed for. Thanks very much.